Straight to the Library of Congress.
Hey, welcome to the Story Studio podcast. Curious what we would, how we would be in the Library of Congress. Where would we be filed?
Under garbage.
Vital information, probably in one of those secret vaults that are like lined in lead and concrete, so it can be saved in the event of nuclear war.
Area 69.
Today we're going to be talking about...
Wait. Johnny, we should totally do that for Space Shuttle.
So this is officially like, can you imagine what like a real podcast marketer, PR sort of person would say? And like if they critiqued one of these podcasts. Okay, so he actually got to today we're going to talk about...
And then jokes.
Do not.
That is not a...
Ooh, we should hire a professional podcast critique.
Right, so
come on the show.
Oh, I love that. Dave, do you remember, actually, you probably both remember this. Do you remember way back in the day, Men with Pens used to do, just remember way back in the day, Men with Pens.
Mm-hmm.
But, they used to do those drive-by.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, they would be really, really fun to get like a professional to critique our podcast.
It's fun to imagine the first-time listener. So they got to the point where they're going to say what the show is about, derailed, and then derailed even more in analyzing it.
We should spend 40 minutes doing.
We should. Let's just never circle back to it.
So what is today's topic?
Murder.
Murder. All right. Yeah, it's finally.
Oh, I thought we were talking about COVID today. Are we not talking about COVID?
We're not talking about COVID.
Oh, YouTube just dinged us. We're now suppressed.
Is that a thing? Okay, well, I don't want to go down. No, I don't want to go down. Hold on. I'm actually going to say what the show is about. It is about murder. It's about murdering your darlings. If anybody doesn't know that quote, I think it's just murder your darlings. I don't know how much there more is to it.
That you love.
Killing the people that you love, killing the ideas that you love, though, in order to tell a better story.
That Dave's always, since I met him, he's always talked about murdering his darlings, but he didn't even know it was a writing quote until recently.
Dave was always slaving over his old-fashioned typewriter going, I have to murder my darlings. I have to murder my darlings in a sort of a Shining, there's all work and no play sort of a way.
Yes.
Imagine you guys in a hotel, a giant abandoned hotel, snowbound for the winter. Okay,
I feel like that right now.
Are either of you in any way interested about the?
No.
Okay.
Oh no!
Wait, I'm curious what it is. Is this something cool? Is that what is this what you're going to ask about for something cool?
No, this isn't a something cool, but it is related to The Shining. So J.J. Abrams, and part of his HBO deal, is doing a mini-series, actually I think it's a series called Overlook. That's about the hotel. Are you interested in that at all?
I don't know. It just depends how it's handled. I just, J.J. Abrams, he always starts with great expectations for me, but only a few times do I feel like he's hit the finish.
Oh, agreed. I think he's amazing at conceptualizing. He comes up with excellent takes on things. I'm going to say the answer is no on this for you, Johnny. Dave, that's possible. Did you ever read his Superman script that they were all gaga over at Annie Pool back 15 years ago?
No,
but I read his book.
Fan.
I did not read his book.
Can I get his book for you?
You did, yeah.
Wow, thanks.
The concept is so cool,
right?
And then you read it and you go, I don't give a shit. What was the story?
I did start the book. I got to the wedding scene, but to me it was more conceptual. I love the concept.
I agree, but a concept doesn't carry it beyond, look, there's a book with a cool concept. Okay, I'm walking away now.
Yeah, I totally agree. So J.J. Abrams is, I don't know, Damon Lindelof is done for me. He's kind of taken the J.J. Abrams and just one-upped it, because Watchmen had all of the mystery boxes that J.J. Abrams is famous for, but he actually closed all the ones that mattered. Right now, I just started Leftovers, and
you like him?
Well, I've only seen the pilot, but I saw it twice. So I watched the pilot, and then I thought, you know what?
Is the Leftovers your something cool?
Can be.
I'm just trying to think maybe we should make some progress.
I love the sound.
This is your something cool.
All right. Leftovers is my something cool. So I watched the pilot and then thought they might want to watch it with me. So I rewatched it. They do want to watch it with me, and it's just there's so much mystery.
Season 2 is even better than season 1.
Yeah, I'm in. I'm totally in. But I'm in because I have a lot of trust with Damon Lindelof now, and that matters. So.
Yeah, I haven't seen season 3 yet. I want to rewatch it because I've forgotten mostly everything, and I've heard that season 3 has he delivers. So that's good to know. The soundtrack to that show is just fucking beautiful. One of my favorite composers. I can't remember his name right now. Yeah, I think
it's the same composer as
Max Richter.
Oh no, it's not then.
And what do you call it? Oh, J.J. Abrams. I think he gets involved in a lot of projects, kind of like you. And I'm guessing a lot of it gets like farmed off to other people.
Yeah.
That like because you got the TV writers room and all that, and I think he just gets involved in a lot of shit. Can't do it all, so I think it gets watered down. That's my guess as to what's going on.
Yeah, but even the stuff that's fully in his hands, like he could have brought the last Star Wars home, and I know,
I haven't seen that yet, so don't.
Well, that's hard too because you've got,
I'll spoil it for you. It's not great.
You've got a bajillion dollar, enterprise behind you with
Star
Disney.
Trek.
So it's not like, yeah. Well, he started Star Trek and they didn't see that through.
That was an enterprise joke.
I don't know. I like JJ. JJ's a little bit like Robert Rodriguez, who I like as a director a lot more than I like his movies. Like I like his aesthetic. I like what he's trying to do, but I don't.
Yeah, I've actually run into that exact same thing, and I'm like Rodriguez. Like he did that. Wait, no, I didn't really like that. Well, he did that. No, I didn't really like that. Yeah, so yeah, I get it.
Great energy as a director, and I love how.
Well, Spy Kids was a breakthrough.
Well, no, Spy Kids was cool. He's like, I'm a new dad. I'm gonna make this. Like he made that movie for no money, and so it was a juggernaut for Dimension Films at the time because he was able to stretch like a couple $1 million and make it look like this big $30 million movie.
Yeah, but as a genre hopper, I would even say this: who goes from something like From Dusk Till Dawn to Spy Kids, like those being in the same bucket is weird. I almost feel like he should have, used a pen name.
Yeah.
We should call this episode Murdering Our Podcast.
He's got Shark Boy and Lava Girl and Sin City were like back to back. And that's just crazy. If you've never seen Shark Boy and Lava Girl, you're really lucky.
And I was rewatching Sin City and I was going, yeah, there's really not a lot of story here. I kept waiting for things to happen. I'm like, oh, okay.
No, it just looks badass.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's frame for frame a comic book. Like there's so much to like about it, but I don't know that there's the most fun I probably ever had with a Robert Rodriguez movie was Once Upon a Time in Mexico. But even that is such a trifle. It's so forgettable. And it's mostly because Johnny Depp has like lines that I just know Tarantino actually wrote where he's like, are you a Mexican or a Mexicant? It's really not a good line, but it just works in the camp of that movie. Anyway.
My something cool. I don't remember if I mentioned this last week, but I watched Dead to Me season 2. It's the only show my wife
I haven't seen that one yet.
Likes to watch with me. Yeah, it's really good. It's even better than the first one, I feel. So I didn't think it would be like you capture the magic once, and like they're so clever in the way their use of cliffhangers is just fucking beautiful. So. Yeah,
they do great cliffhangers. I actually liked season 1 better, but I thought season 2 was great. Like that's not a diss on season 1. It's just that season 2, season 1 just really caught me by surprise.
Yeah, and I like the actor, and I won't spoil anything, but the actor that plays a different role, I just thought that was because I felt he was a little wasted on season 1, and this time around, I think he really delivered some new ones.
Yeah, and they took what could have been cheap and made it awesome.
Yeah,
and the formula I really appreciated as a storyteller who puts things together very specifically. I really appreciated the structure of the first season, which wasn't nearly as tight the second season, but it was every episode was at the 15-minute mark, you had a twist, and then at the 30-minute mark, they have a cliffhanger. And that's how they did all the way through the series, and it was just great. But this season did a lot with the relationships. There's a particular relationship that I thought was just so perfectly handled. And not in a ham-fisted way. It was just like, I just believed it and I loved it. And
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm totally with Dave. If you like season 1, you'll love season 2.
The character work was better. They were more likable, I felt. You just all around it was a show I cared more about.
Have both of you guys seen it?
No, I haven't
Johnny
seen season
not.
2.
No,
because we're finishing The Americans, and it's 7 seasons or 6 seasons, and
but
so
you've seen
after
season 1, I mean.
Of Dead to Me, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Do either of you, because my family cannot watch this without laughing many, many times, especially as this character says certain things, but do either of you see Lori in Christina Applegate's character?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, maybe a little. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know her as well, and I haven't seen the show, and it's been a while.
Watch it. Next time you watch it with that filter, especially when she's like going off on somebody.
Right. I do remember a lot of outbursts that kind of like were aggressive outbursts that I could
And it's the specific language that she uses and the tone and the fact that she's blonde in that very specific way too. There's a lot of very Lori and there were a couple of moments in season 2, especially the one, Dave, where she's drops the wine bottle at the counter, where like my whole family was just laughing because it was so easy to picture Lori in that scene.
Also, female me sometimes.
I have a few that I could do. I'll keep a punchy one today, so we can talk about murder. It has nothing to do with anything, and none of you are going to care. But I came out of my office today to discover that Sydney was making Pop-Tarts. I was like, I didn't even know you could make Pop-Tarts. So apparently you can. Apparently you can make homemade Pop-Tarts, and they were really good. She's like, well, we didn't have Pop-Tarts. What was I supposed to do? So there you go. I hope everybody took some education from that. All right, so let's talk about murdering your darlings. Does anyone want to take another stab at describing exactly what that means?
Well, I always took that to mean the things in your book that you think are really precious, which is why I do love collaboration, because it gets you the fuck out of your head, right? Like, let somebody else make those decisions. I love that. I love when if I make an outline and I pass it to somebody, it's no longer my job, right? I love the collaborative passing back and forth, but I think if you don't have a collaborator, then that's something you need to work a little bit harder to do, because we all like our stuff probably a little bit more than it deserves to be liked.
Not me.
And we give, dude, you hate your stuff more than it deserves to be hated. So I don't even know what you're talking about.
I need someone to save my darlings from me murdering them.
I actually wish you liked your stuff more. But no, I think that most of the times as you're writing, you want to be able to have that like objective view, and it's not always easy. So I like the phrase "murder your darlings" because those are the things that are precious to you. I would never cut that, but then it goes to somebody else and they cut it and it comes back and you don't even notice it's gone, right? Most of the stuff that's cut out of our draft, we wouldn't remember. We wouldn't say, hey, I really missed that great line. It's just, it seems so great when we're doing it.
I think that I see those things when I go back through. I think I've gotten better at being objective about things like a joke that I thought was funny or an aside, and I do tend to axe those if I'm editing for myself. But I know that I
never axe them in the draft, right? Which is why you have to murder your darlings. I mean, sometimes you're like, oh well, that's garbage.
Yeah, no, I don't axe them in the draft, but then it is a pretty fine line, because at least for the way, and I'm thinking this would be even stronger for somebody like Ben in our studio, who writes with a lot of like character and personality, like the writing itself. I think that we're on a continuum as writers where there are people where, and this isn't meant to be judgmental in any way, shape, or form. It's just everybody's different. There are things where like the story and the driving plot matters more, frankly, than the writing, and there are writers for whom the writing matters more, and the plot matters a little less. Like, literature tends to be a little bit more that way, and so I always feel like a lot of, what is it that I'm doing that lends to voice? So for instance, I mentioned a few episodes ago, I noticed that I make a lot of pop culture references, but not current pop culture. They're like 90s pop culture references.
Well, your pop culture references are ones that have usually already stood the test of time. So it's not the exception. I think the only exception, I mean, there's funny ones that we do on purpose, like when I dared you to put Pizza Rat in a book and you did, right?
Yes.
So there's like that. But generally it's like, you know, RoboCop is one that we just did, right? You did RoboCop a whole bunch of times and the last thing that we wrote. But RoboCop is already classic. Like that's not going to stop being a reference point.
Right. I mean, I actually find modern day pop culture right here, right now, the fad sort of things, I actually find pretty obnoxious. So
right, because it seems fatty when you read it.
Right. When you do something, so, and I know that this is a little sideways to what I was saying, but I think it's interesting, is that you could talk about something that everybody thinks is great, you know, like you guys really love Magnolia, and that was a while back. So if I referred to Magnolia, then I could be making a reference to something that has, quote, stood the test of time, as you said. RoboCop has stood the test of time in a totally different way. And that it stood the test of time because it sucks, kind of. Like I was watching Starship Troopers the other night, and I'm like, this is so bad, and it's awesome too.
It's really awesome.
Films, or like Total Recall.
Wow, did you have a Paul Verhoeven marathon?
No, I didn't watch Total Recall recently, but now I'm thinking of it. I like him the same way I like John Carpenter, where the movies are strictly kind of B movies.
Have you ever seen him try to take himself seriously?
Verhoeven?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
So like, I forget what it was. He did this World War II. It might have even been in black and white.
Did he do Showgirls?
Yes, I think he did do show. I think that was a Joe Esterhaus.
I thought that was a joke, and now I'm going, oh, maybe.
No,
there wasn't enough.
That was a masterpiece.
There wasn't enough blood or giant bugs for it for me.
I think it was a Joe Esterhaus script, but it was a Paul Verhoeven movie. I think you're right, Dave. Let's do a show about Paul Verhoeven.
Where was I going with that? I don't remember.
Pop culture something.
Oh, well, that there's pop that it's.
Okay. So I was speaking about, right. Yeah, we diverted into sort of, I think for me, that's a way that I like to bring in stuff that feels contemporary, but it's automatically like my first book was set in 1994. I know that you adopted something similar, Sean, where you set a book. And if you set it, then you don't have to worry about it being timeless, even if it's being set recently. Like this book is set in 2019 or 2020. And then it's like, well, it isn't antiquated. That's when it took place, motherfucker. So, you know.
Yeah, I said something in 2008 recently, and there's a lot of Bharat jokes, but that's because that was appropriate at that time, right? And the person who's making the Bharat jokes is an idiot who would have made Bharat jokes.
Well, I think the trick is, and
you're saying it, isn't it Borat, not Bharat?
I thought it was Borat too. I'm Borat.
That'd be so weird, man.
I think the thing is when the narrator, when you get the feeling that the author feels that these things are super cool, that's when it's a problem. When the author is winking along with you, then it's like, okay.
I always, whenever I see pop culture stuff, I get annoyed by it. Like I will never put it in my book. I always feel like the author is trying to show how cool they are.
No, you would much rather have characters dipping French fries into milkshakes.
That's timeless. That's something universal.
Well, here's where I'm going with all of this, because the whole idea of that particular nuance of the way that I write is like, okay, so are those darlings that might be murdered or not? And I would argue that in a lot of cases, no. I think that that's part of like my style for those jokes. But if there's something where I can't think of a time that I've done it, but I'm sure I have, of course, where I've maybe reached too far for a joke, and it's like I just know that I want to get in that joke, that punchline, and it's not meant to be a funny book. It's an aside, and I stretch something too far. Then that's the sort of thing that I might cut. But I would think that a lot of it stays because it's more voice than anything. So the funny thing here is that when we were talking about doing this topic, I said we were talking about murdering your darlings. And he said, yes. And I said, I'm having a hard time thinking of ones that I've cut out. And I know I have, I just can't think of what. And Sean goes, well, you did just throw away 80,000 words of a draft. But that wasn't darling to me. So I don't know where the
darling cost.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of your ideas, and it's okay. Well, let's move away from that project, because that project was clearly an anomaly. The project that you started right after that, which has RoboCop in it, now
This is not the RoboCop book, by the way. Like we've given this example so many times, you guys are going to think that it's not. It's just nuance.
There's a in oh, I was going to say in that story. Oh fuck! I lost my train of thought.
All right. Well, I have one that I can say because you were talking about the big project where I threw things away, and so let's compare that. A lesson that could be taken from that in terms of killing your darlings or whatever would maybe be better applied to something that I'm planning to rewrite right now that I won't mention because it's kind of a secret project, but it doesn't matter. It's the same basic idea where my options for both of those were to go in and try and fix what was wrong or to just throw it all away and write a new one. And so for me, I think that...
let's give a little background on this because that's actually interesting.
Yeah.
So we have something we'll talk about soon, but not quite yet. But it's an adaptation that's actually happening, and they were doing some casting for this thing. And
so the project is a script. We can say that.
Okay, yeah, the project is a script, and we were talking about the cast, and one of the characters in the script, the gender changed. And
2, actually.
Who was the other one?
The lead?
Well, yeah, that's who
it's going to be really hard for me to talk about this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right.
Like I'm trying not to be a ball buster.
Okay, I know the other one. All right, so yeah, 2 genders changed, but also a few other things. Like there's another opening scene that is actually very smart. Like I love the suggestion to include this scene, but it's not in the script. And what Johnny was saying, and it took me a little while actually, because when Johnny was first talking about this, I couldn't tell if he was wanting to rewrite the script or not rewrite the script. But what he was actually fighting for is I don't want to dabble at the script. I want to totally rewrite it. If I'm going to throw out a darling or 2, I'd rather just drown the whole litter.
Well, it reminds me a little bit of that, the Dean Wesley Smith thing that people talk about. And I don't exactly know how Dean means it, but I know I've heard this distinction made where he talks about like, it's something like he doesn't believe in editing or doesn't believe in rewriting or there's something like that. But it's this exact thing. Like in his mind anyway, not that he's like the oracle or whatever, but the discussion was, going through and doing surgery is artificial. You shouldn't do that. It was like, don't rewrite except, this is the Asimov thing, don't rewrite except to editorial requirement or something. And then, but redrafting entirely, throwing it away and writing again was like, okay, per his, and it's actually, I would agree, because when you go in, it's a little like, if you have like a wall that you painted and it's been 10 years since that wall's been painted and there's scuffs on the wall, you can go and you can like try to match the paint. You can try and, just paint out that spot. And it all looks like shit because there's all these little, like that was an old version. And then there's these little new patches on top of it. It's better to usually just repaint the whole damn wall. And so that's the argument here that I'm making is like, when I go into something that is, because this is an old project. I mean, the adaptation isn't old, but the source material is. And so going in and trying to like add a scene, it's not tweaking lines. It's not punch up. It's fundamentally reorganizing the script, because if we're doing this, the scene is, it's like there's some flash forward, flashback in time. And my argument was there's going to be little seeds that I'm going to want to sow because it's kind of thematic. Like, you get from the beginning to the end and you go, oh, okay, there was a little character arc thing that happened there. So I would want to plant seeds throughout the draft. So if I'm doing something at the beginning, something at the end, and then trying to shoehorn in references to these things, I'd rather just rewrite the whole fucking thing so you can't see the seams.
Yeah, and a lot of times that feels like more work, but it's actually not, because you'll go faster, you understand the story, which, I mean, Dave, that's your process, right? Write the story, throw it away, understand the story, rewrite it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, actually, there's a darlings point here I want to insert before I forget it, because I knew that there was something there. And that's that when you do rewrite something, the tendency, this is at least my process, is I will at first want to reference the old one. Like if I were to print it out and highlight the things that I like and try to redo it, and that's usually a mistake. Like usually I have to say, what's good will be good. And then because what that is that's trying to save, oh, there's a really good line there. Oh, there was a really good passage. I'll just save that passage and write around it. Like, no, it's usually better to just do the whole thing.
Okay, that was the thing I forgot, actually. So we were talking about the book that you just finished up recently, and it's it was a harder book because it's kind of a complicated series anyway, and this is the final book in that series. And so Johnny had to, he started it, it got complicated, he pressed pause.
I forgot about this. Mm-hmm.
And then he came back to it a full year later, maybe even 2. Like it was a while. He came back to it a while later.
And before I hit pause, it felt good. Like it got a little lost, but the stuff I had written felt good. I was like, I can just pick this back up. That's the way it felt at the time.
Going back to that, Johnny, how was that? Like, did you feel a need? How many words did you have into it? Like 20,000?
Okay, well, the piece that I don't think we said is that in that case too, I threw it away because it was about 20, maybe 25,000 words, probably closer to 20, and because it felt good, like I thought these were fundamental. These were like. There's a big gap in the narrative, and so I got to kind of reset. And so the chapters that I had written were like chapters 1 through 3 or 4, or no, it would have been more than that. But it was stuff where I was laying foundation pieces for a world. It wasn't like there was a cliffhanger at the end of book 4, and then I immediately picked it up and had to solve it, and I didn't like the way that I'd solved it. These were things that were totally transposable. Like it should have been very easy to take the beginning chapters and just tack onto them and then build in the plot as it was necessary from book 4. But I can't, it's that old paint analogy again. It's like, well, I know I painted that corner and that corner looks fine, but that was 5 years ago and now it's going to look stupid. Might as well do the whole thing. You just asked how was it? I don't know if I'm answering how it was, but that was my thinking. Like, I don't want to make a stitch between new work and old work. I just want to like rewrite it. But it was tempting to try and keep those pieces, to try and like pull scenes out and say that entire first chapter, you remember that first chapter, totally should have just pulled right out. But there's just subtle things in the language that I use because I know new things that weren't in that draft.
Right. Well, flow really comes into play there. Like it's hard to get flow if you're picking up where you left off a year, 2 years before. It's just, that's not reasonable. I think that, and trying to, sift through it like a junk pile and see what you could salvage is not a smart way to do it either.
And then it's a patchwork. You're salvaging something that was really good and you're stitching it to something that just has a different flavor.
Which isn't fun, takes longer. And when you're done, you don't have something that you're as proud of, almost always, because you feel uncertain. Stitching makes you feel uncertain.
You know what it's
like? How many times have you
like?
gone into something and you're like, doing a little bit of patchwork and then you're done. You're like, now it's perfect. You always have doubt, right?
Oh, no. Yeah, I know. I never feel good about those. It's a little like, and I know that you and I, Sean, at least have done this. I don't know how many other people have, is if you've ever written a scene from 2 sides. So you write a scene, maybe let's just simplest example has 2 people. And then you've got some weird loop sort of thing. And then maybe later you revisit that same scene and you see it from another angle. You see it from person B's angle. Those chapters are always so hard to write because I'm trying to, like, I have to artificially go back and recapture lines of dialogue and movements and, when did the person get up and throw the vase, that sort of thing. So it's the same to me. It takes you out of flow and creative mode and into analytical, what do I put where mode.
Yeah, I wrote something. I've talked about this draft a few times. It's the hardest thing I wrote this year. It was an outline that Joel made, and it was all that. It was like, and I didn't pick up on that before I started writing, and I should have. Like, I should have spent more time getting to know the outline before I began, because once I did, it was all like a chapter would end, and then it would begin where the other chapter ended, and lots of different POVs, and basically 10 minutes worth of story all happened with 7 different characters. And so that seems really cool conceptually, and I love it in the outline, and then I'm actually having to write it, and I'm like, this is miserable. This isn't fun at all. And I had more doubt about that than just about anything I've written in a long time. But Dave, as critical as he can be, really liked it. So that garbage was mostly in my head.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Killing Your Darlings. What's that process like for the 2 of you?
Dave, you want to hit that?
Dave's going to hit that
first. I mean,
yeah. Well, I don't. Okay. To hold the finish Killing Your Darling, holding on to something that really don't know if I feel like that doesn't happen to me too often. Usually when I'm ready something, it's just not working. I fucking hate it when it's gone. So there's been a few times though, like where I've thought of like a really cool story that I wanted to flesh out or something, and or I've had some character like arc that I thought would be really awesome to follow up that really brought out something in the character and made it more interesting. But then I would think that would work in a show, but it doesn't work for the book. So I have to get rid of it. And that I've done more than a few times. I can't remember any specific examples. But that's what I'm more likely to do, rather than just like, small lines here or there, or an entire character, I guess. But for those, sometimes I'll save something and I'll be like, okay, well maybe I'll write a cookie story for that or something.
I have a question for you guys. So, and I guess this would mainly be for Sean, because I know Dave doesn't put up with this bullshit, but, so Sean, you and I write with a lot of kind of inside jokes, dare you to put Pizza Rat in, all sorts of little references that are, to this or that. And there's a real argument there for like, well, you guys are artificially adding darlings that don't need to be there. And
I would kill all those fuckers. I would drown them.
We had a character in. So I guess I can tell this story in the audiobook of The Beam. They had a whole cast that they had reading all these different parts, and then we got to know Ray Chase, who's been on the show a few times, and he voiced Mauricio. I'm sorry, he did voice Mauricio, but he also voiced Doc in The Beam. And before, damn it, okay, I don't know how to tell this story without some pretty significant spoilers. Okay, well, let's just say we wrote for Ray, like we modified the story so that Ray could read some stuff. And we've done that sort of thing before. Like I'll have a favorite character that I'm like, well, that guy should probably go, but no, let's make him the star in the next book. I'm thinking of like Caspian. Like how many times have we brought that guy back? So
well, is that more of a fan service sort of thing though?
Oh no, I don't give a shit what the fans think.
Oh, but you're a fan of it. So.
Yes,
yeah, me. Like it's me service.
But surely you're not the only one.
I would say
I don't know.
In this instance, it's part of our process. It's what makes our books special. There's an energy to them. When I'm writing, like there's a ton of inside jokes in the outline, and then there's a ton in the draft, and then I'll add them. So like, for example, this is just a recent one that's pretty funny because
better not be adding jokes to my shit. I'm gonna be really pissed.
I do. You don't even notice them because
I don't reread it.
They're so embedded.
Dave's always getting emails about how funny he is. Oh my God, Dave, you have a problem with these people, I'm telling you.
Damn it, I lost it again.
In the outlines.
Right, so the outlines are always full of jokes, and
I do like that.
The drafts, but the drafts are too, and that's like Johnny should put those in, and if it's too much, if it's distracting for the reader, then I will pull it out. And I'm better at it than I used to be. So here's an example of one that probably would have been cut if I was editing today, that at the time when, Johnny and I were still first learning to write together, it didn't get cut. But, we're talking about pop culture and like timeless references. So they go through, this is the third book.
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to say. Exactly what you're going to say. And I've run into this and I've gone, yeah, I wish we'd have cut that.
Yeah. All right. I'm curious to see if it is the thing, but it's in the Dinosaur, Missouri. Is that right?
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. They're hearing snippets of like the Gangnam Style.
Gangnam Style. Yeah.
Right. And the problem is that was because it's like there's like radio interference from all over the multiverse and stuff. But we picked contemporary shit. We should have done like, La Bamba or something.
Right. Exactly. And that's what I mean. It's like, it's not just murdering your darlings. It's getting better at refining that voice. So to answer your question, Johnny, I absolutely think that belongs in our work. I don't necessarily think it belongs in my work with Dave. He's a different storyteller. So
that would piss me off.
Yeah, I try to get away with a little bit of it, but I'm very respectful of who he is as a storyteller. So
I take the story very seriously.
right, but then
Where's the line? Because this could be interpreted. I know this isn't what you're saying, and I wouldn't take it this way, but it could almost be interpreted as, well, we don't need to worry about it. Everything goes. There are no darlings in murder.
No, because there are a lot of darlings that get murdered. So the last book that we were talking about, the one with RoboCop, which there are a couple of RoboCop jokes cut. Like there's a lot of RoboCop jokes in the book. The book is
right,
like
because I just listened to the character. Right, because I'm not doing the second draft. I just let the characters talk.
So, but that's good. That's what I want from a collaborator, is all the jokes, so that we can cut them and the best ones are there. Because if Johnny's like, is this funny or not? I'm not going to get good stuff, right? He needs to be confident in what he gets. But a lot of darlings were murdered because the final word count on that, like I just finished it, it's 97,000 words. And I don't know what the original draft was, but I want to say 125, maybe.
I was going to guess 120.
Yeah. So, that's some murdering, right? But
although how much of that is like things that I really liked, and how much of it was because, so after, just for everybody out there in podcast land, after Sean edited me, well, I'll just speak to you because it's weird that way. After you edited me for a while, I went back and I did like Vampire Maurice or something like that. So I did something on my own, and then I saw it with new eyes, because I hadn't done that since the last Fat Vampire book, because I never did my second drafts. And I started to notice things that I think they were a little more invisible to me in the past. And they were like, I get into these things and I can tell when I start reading a paragraph, I'm like, oh, this paragraph isn't interesting. I don't have to finish it. Like I can tell where I'm going.
Yeah.
If I tend to get overly like introspecty, and there's a lot of like wool gathering or internal monologue, like that stuff usually gets cut. But that isn't darlings or repetition.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I can't think of a lot of things that. Okay, here's the thing. So I think this is a question.
Sean's going to go out of his way to find something that I would argue to keep and then piss me off. Watch.
Well, I know I can't think of. I can think of one thing, actually. I can think of one thing that I cut.
Is it Parker Barnes? Arguing for a word choice, because that was really petty. That didn't really matter.
Two things. Okay, I can think of two things. Yeah, but no, it really depends on my collaborator. Again, there was one thing that I handled very differently with both of you. And Johnny was like, I don't get it. Dave can do this and I can't. And I'm like, yeah, but it's tonal. It's just, it's a certain thing. And so like I'm writing with Bonnie a lot right now, and Bonnie cuts heavy, right? Bonnie's made me more aggressive when I'm cutting my own stuff, because Bonnie's rule is, if it does not serve the story, it does not belong. So I can write something that's in fantastic voice, but if it doesn't immediately serve the story, it's gone. If I write an inside joke, and it doesn't matter if it's funny, it doesn't matter if it's an inside joke designed for Bonnie, she's like, fuck it, doesn't belong in the story. She cuts it, because that's her editorial voice, and that makes sense. So this is recently, and I don't remember what book it was for. I don't remember, but I wrote something, and I specifically had the character go to the bathroom because I thought it was funny. And I said, this is for Dave. And she said, Dave's not buying this book, or something like that. and cut it.
She's accurate there.
Like, I didn't even get my joke in, which is fine. Like, I cannot think of a situation where anyone working with me would cut something and I would fight for it, because it's your turn with.
Right. And we've had that discussion before, but I mean, I don't want to argue for like the toilet scene, because who knows that, but where is the line on that? Because maybe this is making the point, but I was what was the corrections? I finally gave up on it, right? Like I got, I don't know, halfway through, and I was like, okay, whatever. So this maybe isn't the best example, but at the beginning of the book, there was a lot where I was like just kind of enjoying being with the characters. And I think that that's an extreme example, because that stuff, it didn't really serve the story technically. Like there is a lot in sort of literature books where they don't go anywhere. But I can also think of books where I did just kind of enjoy watching the characters go on adventures. So like in the Harry Potter books, this is not a spoiler, Dave, I don't believe, but Hermione gets all involved with elfin welfare, right? So she's she's starts a society to like protect the elves or something.
Dave's writing a series called Elfin Warfare right now.
So like none of that is necessary to the story unless you try to do like a Sean slippery slope thing where, like this is you arguing for the inclusion of one more goal or something like that, or Lines in Manila is actually story. You can argue on down a slippery slope with something like that of like, well, so it serves the story because we have to know who Hermione is as a character. And
I think it only depends. It depends on who you are as an author. So because who you are as an author is reader expectations, right? So anybody knows that if they get a Johnny V. Truant book versus a David W. Wright book, it's going to be a lot wordier, right? There's going to be probably less story and more time. And but
that you just clarified when you're done.
But that's part of the voice. Like Dave does not spend a lot of time on his stories. That's not what I mean. Like that didn't come off right at all. It's like there's not a lot of introspection. Introspection for a Dave character will be a sentence or two. For Johnny, it could run for a third of a page because you are getting deeper into those thoughts. So we might have a third of a page and it should maybe be a quarter of the page, so that gets cut. But that's still 10x what the character would have done in Dave's story, right? So Dave is a very lean storyteller. In fact, so much that sometimes we need to add a little bit of connective tissue and a little more weight to the stories where, you're having to clean it out. So I think that extra voice is what our stories, Johnny, need. Like, it's wonderful. Like, that's how you tell a story. But my job is to make sure there's just the right amount of it.
Well, here's the problem with this is the idea of like, why murder your darlings? And the answer is to make the story better. So if anybody's following the logic here, the problem is there's no objective consensus on what a better story is. So like, okay, is it better if it kind of like there's people they're going to read my indulgences and go, oh my God, shut up and get to the point. There's stuff that's the people that are going to read Dave's things and they're going to say, boy, I wish there was some levity here or some drawing things out. So I guess it's just, you just kind of have to come back to who you are, the success, the results that you're getting. I do want to clarify that Bonnie said, she said, but it was appealing to the reader. So this would refer to any of the other counterexamples, whereas Sean's bathroom scene broke the tone of the scene, which I think is that right there. So if you're trying to build a tense scene and there's an internal reference or an inside reference. So there was a time, here's a darling of Sean's that I murdered. We had, and I'm going to go ahead and use the name because it's funnier this way. So we were writing a romance. And, in a typical romance, like
All
a
booty, Elven Warfare?
Yes, no, not that kind of romance. In a typical new adult hetero romance sort of thing, like you get these brooding bad boy types and whatever. And so we had a guy who was going to have this like public speaking empire. And Sean's like, okay, his name is Robbie Bobbins because he's like Tony Robbins, but he's Robbie Bobbins. And I said, dude, I can't do Robbie Bobbins. I can't do it.
Mr. Show David Cross character.
Because no reader is going to want to have sex with Robbie Bobbins. Like it sounds like Ronald McDonald's sidekick or something.
So speaking of which, I would fuck Grimace.
Or Tony Robbins parody character. I just thought that would be so fun.
And I think that I could write a Tony Robbins parody character too, but the minute it's clearly a Tony Robbins parody, that breaks it too. That's the problem. So I think that is, Bonnie's point is well taken. I think that tonally, you don't want to have, that actually is something, that would detract from the story. Like that would detract from
totally.
For sure.
Yeah,
the only thing more distracting would actually be watching Tony Robbins have sex.
Like you don't have the video.
Him and Grimace.
Wow, Grimace. What is with you and Grimace? Because you
Grimace is
he's mentioned it a few times.
Yeah, but Grimace, I don't even think he exists anymore.
I don't think so.
He's never left my heart.
Yeah, but like it's not just that you bring up Grimace, but you bring him up in like sexual.
No, yeah, they were Mandela effect right out of history.
I just want to know like what happened.
I have a Grimace fetish.
Were you Grimace for like Halloween one year?
Yes.
You should be Grimace actually.
I was.
Grimace was like half face.
Yeah.
All right, so maybe when we start getting giggly, maybe it's time to go. But I wanted to read the second part of what Bonnie wrote too, because this is, I think,
this is
really
a perfect
key.
point.
She says something that enhances the emotional impact of the story stays, even if it's not necessary, which I wholeheartedly agree with. And I would also argue that some of the stuff that we were talking about, Sean, that you and I do, enhances the emotional impact of the scene because it's tonal, and that's the emotional.
Or the bonding. There are times when something can be unnecessary in one of our books, but it makes you like the reader or the author more. It makes you like the story more. It's just somehow it's charming enough to belong, even if it doesn't necessarily.
Like our piss scenes.
It's like your piss scenes, exactly.
Well, there's another one too that I can think of, and I don't know if this makes the same point. I don't know if this is helpful, but I think that examples are gonna, I think, be good here. So there was, and this is another one. This is like pre-murder, right? So when I'm in the first draft writer role, that means that but it's a little different from not writing something that's in an outline. So when we were writing Unicorn Western, you know what I'm gonna say? With something of yours that I vetoed.
Oh yeah.
So this was that was a 9-book series, and the first one is just zany, ridiculous joke at Dave's expense. The second and third were a continuation of a jokes at Dave's expense. But around book, I think the end of book 4, something like that.
It was the cliffhanger at the end of book 4,
where it's like the tone kind of shifted, and it stopped being this
Unicorn Western, the New Testament.
Because if you're going to write 9 books about a magical unicorn, and they tell a long story rather than being episodic, episode of the week sort of things, the story just has to get bigger and bigger, at least in my mind. So by
your Dark Tower series,
it is Dark Tower-ish too. That's the funny thing. Like, it's similar in scope by the end of the Dark Tower, and so the unicorn in Unicorn Western his name is Edward, and they get a little famous toward the end, and so. Sean was like, and you kind of asked for this as a request because Haley liked it, right? Was that you guys went somewhere and they had like little.
We went to a Chinese buffet and they had these little like cotton candy things that you get.
But they look like horns, and so Haley was
sort of the cotton candy, and then the cone is left, so there's a horn.
Right. And so Sean was like, what if they had those and they were called them like Edward Poofs or something? They were having a festival in the town, but the problem was that by the time I wrote that book, the time for Edward Poofs and even jokes about chili, which were earlier, had passed. It was like we'd gotten to a point where the story it kind of got epic and serious, and there were snarky moments and stuff, but the tone, it would have been disruptive. It would have called it out, and it was a shame because the same exact thing, Haley also made the request that the unicorn bleed rainbows, which in book 1 was like, okay, in book 1 we're bleeding rainbows, but by the time we got to book 9, if I had to have him bleed rainbows, I would have had to make it serious somehow.
I totally forgot that was in the book and that Haley requested it. That's awesome.
Well, we have a whole sequence that I bent over backwards to fit in as an inside joke with my family in one of the books, and it may break tone, but I don't know. I think maybe I kind of made it work because that series is so gonzo.
You're pretty good at making that shit work.
Thank you. Any final thoughts on murdering, Dave? You like to murder? This is your chance. Talk about it.
Always hide the body. Oh, no. No, I got nothing.
All right. Well,
except enthusiasm.
Yes, enthusiasm.
So we are. Go ahead.
Well, I think interesting closing for me.
Thinking about Grimace.
I know. Please show us your hands. I think that the best thing is to just know that nothing is precious. I think a lot of writers feel like, oh, if I scrap this, I have to save it and use it for something else, or just have faith in yourself that the words are going to come next time too, and you're not going to stop being clever or stop being able to tell a story or stop being able to figure out what a character is going to say. If you did it once, you could do it again. And it does help to have somebody to pass a draft to. Like, that is very comforting. But if you are, doing this solo, then just have confidence as you go through it. It's okay to cut. It's okay to cut. And the faster a reader gets through your story without speed bumps and enjoys it, the more they're going to want to read the next thing that you wrote. If you leave all those things in there that should have been cut, the reader spends more time with your story, has less fun, and is less likely to buy the next book in the series.
Dave, have you or have you not drawn Grimace and Ronald McDonald in a sexually compromising situation?
No, not those two together.
But
maybe
some
the
of
Fry
McDonald's
guys
gang.
in Grimace and the Hamburglar watching. Yeah, maybe.
Likes to watch in the corner. All right, so we are not doing Dr. Sleep next week. That's 2 weeks out.
2 weeks out, yeah.
Okay, I'm sort of eager to talk about that. I made a lot of notes.
Did you like it or not like it? More than a book?
This is a lot of the discussion, so I don't want to get into it, but it was the most interesting thing because I went from actively not liking it to really loving it.
Wow.
The book or the movie?
The movie.
Okay.
And
Does it make you want to reread the book?
No, because the things that made me love it had everything to do with Mike Flanagan and nothing to do with Stephen King.
All right.
Sorry, Stephen, I still love you, but all the improvements were Flanagan's.
All right.
You've seen it, right, Dave?
No, not yet. It's coming on HBO. So.
Oh, I thought that you weren't you the one to suggest it? I thought you had seen it.
When I found out he had done it, yeah.
Yeah,
but I didn't watch
Mike
it.
Flanagan, and it had good press. Like people like
After Hunting a Hill House, I'll watch anything he does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have either of you read, like, what in the other? There are 4 movies in the Shining, 4 things in the Shining franchise. There's 2 books and 2 movies. Have you read, watched of the others?
I've seen the Shining movie, the Kubrick one. I've seen the Steven Weber miniseries.
Yeah, that wasn't great.
I've read The Shining a couple of times, but I did not read Dr. Sleep.
I've not read either of them. I have both of them though.
Okay. Well, Sean,
Have you
you'll
got
probably
to the wedding scene.
Sean, you'll probably recognize a lot of what I have to say about it then, which will spoil everything. It will spoil the books and the movies. So,
all right, cool. Well,
usually I don't like to watch a movie until I read the book, but I guess in this instance,
never read those books ever.
I know I have.
all right, so that's coming in 2 weeks, and is next week that's the one with Joel, the idea parkour, or
I believe so.
whatever we're calling it. Okay, so that'll be fun. All right, so stay tuned for that. And if you're wondering what the hell idea parkour is, well, that's just the sort of cliffhanger we do to keep all 6 of you out there tuning in. I wonder how many it is. All right, so thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Adios.
Bye.